Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my standard review of the brand new Sigma 24mm f2 DG-DN lens. This is a lens that is designed for Sony FE, full frame mirrorless, which I'm reviewing here. There's also a Leica L version. Now, if you want a more detailed deep dive into the lens and all the different information about it, check out the definitive review instead. Today, I'm going to give you a quicker, more to the point overview here. This is a part of Sigma's iSeries, and I was a little surprised to see it in that only 7 months ago I did a review in February of 2021 of the Sigma 24mm f3.5 DG-DN lens. It's emerging, however, that Sigma has two tiers of this iSeries lenses. All of them are compact, have beautiful build. They're kind of the small yet premium options, an alternative to Sigma's larger maximum aperture lenses in the Art series. But even within the iSeries, there are two tiers that are emerging. Those that are extremely compact with smaller maximum apertures like the 24mm f3.5, the 45mm f2.8, and the announced with this lens 90mm f2.8 that I'll be delivering a review of next week. Then there is also a secondary tier with a bit larger maximum apertures of f2, and that includes this new 24mm f2, the 35mm f2, and the 65mm f2. And for me, it's at this tier that is kind of the sweet spot for me, in that they're still very compact lenses, but it's providing superior optical performance and also obviously a more professional grade maximum aperture, along with that same beautiful build. Now in this case, we get that gorgeous, very tactile build where everything is metal, everything has this just amazing feel to it. I really like the engineering care that goes into the iSeries, and that is something that Sigma's being very intentional about. And so if you love not just taking photos, but love the process, the feel of well-made gear, the iSeries, I suspect, is going to delight you. Now, obviously, if you go from f3.5 to an aperture that is about a stop and a half faster in f2, you're going to end up with a larger lens, though this is still quite a moderate lens in terms of overall size. Whereas the f3.5 was 64mm in diameter with a 55mm filter thread and only 51mm long, the f2 lens is 70mm in diameter with a 62mm front filter thread and is 74mm in length. The lens, of course, is a little bit heftier, weighing in at 360 grams. That compares to 230 grams for the smaller lens. Also different here that favors the other is that the f3.5 lens has a maximum magnification figure of 0.50 times. That's 1 to 2 macro. This is only a more typical 0.15 times, and a little bit behind a lens like the Sony 24mm f1.4 G Master or even the Samyang 24mm f1.8. Still a useful figure, but not quite as high. Another area of differentiation is that the f3.5 lens had only 7 aperture blades. This has a more professional 9 aperture blades. Both lenses essentially have the same degree of build in that there is a weather sealing gasket at the lens mount, but no weather seals inside. And of course, all premium materials, a dual approach to aperture with an aperture ring that can also go into auto mode. It's got an AF/MF switch here, and then a beautifully damped, just gorgeous feeling manual focus ring. All told, it's a beautifully made lens, and even the lens hood itself is made all of metal. Everything is very nice, and you have the choice of either a traditional pinch cap or a magnetic cap that uses the all metal of the lens build to just pop in and off through that means. So while the lens is obviously larger than the f3.5 size, it's still considerably smaller than what the G Master lens is. The G Master lens is over 75 millimeters in diameter and over 92 millimeters long, so considerably longer, and weighs in at about 445 grams. So roughly, as much more than this lens that it is over the f3.5. And of course, most importantly, that GM lens retails for around $1,400 US. This lens is coming at $639, which makes it seem a real value compared to the f3.5 that is priced at $549, so only $90 in difference. And so to me, that seems like money well spent, unless your biggest priority is to have as small a lens as possible. Now, this lens has a stepping motor for autofocus and my experience was very, very positive. I found that focus changes were smooth, they were quiet, they were quick. And then also, if I used the lens to track my face as I approached the camera, that it did a good job of detecting my eye and focusing and transitioning with me. My assistant Craig did note that there were a few situations where it was a little bit sticky in that it didn't want to move, say from a background to a foreground object unless you were really intentional about placing that object and kind of getting the camera's attention, the lens's attention, so to speak. But fortunately, that was fairly isolated. One thing that really did stand out to me is that I got very good performance in lower light conditions. I was shooting in very dark conditions and I autofocused just fine. So obviously that's going to be a chief advantage over the f3.5 lens in that it has a lot less light reaching the camera sensor and you're not going to get as good of autofocus performance. And so that was another area that I really did prefer the f2 lens in performance. The same applies overall to the image quality here. While the f3.5 lens I felt was very strong from wide open and very good when stopped down, I really like having the access to that larger maximum aperture of f2, and in this case this lens is excellent all across the frame starting at f2 and gets even better as you stop it down. It peaks at about f5.6 and is truly incredibly sharp even on my 50 megapixel Sony Alpha 1 all across the frame. Very high levels of performance. Now, the one negative that I did see is that there is a considerable amount of barrel distortion. I had to use about a +18 in Lightroom to correct for that. Obviously, the automatic profile when it arrives is going to help with that and probably give you a little bit better performance because I did see a little trace of a mustache pattern even after a manual correction. Likewise, there's about 2 stops of vignette in the corners at f2. I needed about a +59 on the slider there to correct for that. That's less of a big deal, however, in a more typical type performance. Very strong performances included an excellent control of chromatic aberrations, and you can see in this shot that even if we zoom into these high contrast areas, there's just very little evidence of fringing at all. There's also no evidence of lateral chromatic aberration along the edges of the frame in this test chart shot. I also found that chroma performance is pretty good, and most importantly, this lens has great light gathering potential for shooting the night sky, and the fact that it's sharp across the frame and the vignette is not out of control means that it proved a good option for shooting astro. Though along the edges there's a little bit more chroma than what I would like, I still consider this to be a really good lens for astrophotography. So all told, a lot of good things, and it held up reasonably well against bright light and flare as well, though when I stopped the lens down I did see a little bit more defined ghosting patterns from it. At the end of the day, though, I really like the images that I got from the lens, and I felt like it was, the right kind of size to bring along. This is the kind of lens I'd actually use, whereas some larger lens, like say Sigma's 24mm f1.4, it would be large enough that I would often leave at home. This is small enough that it would often go out with me. And that really does add a whole other level of value here. And so you have it, a lens that has a great price, has a beautiful build, and very strong performance, makes this a winning combination, and a lens that, at least to me, is far more attractive than what the f3.5 version was. So in that sense, I can understand Sigma's approach here. 2 24mm lenses in the matter of 7 months might seem excessive, but they're establishing multiple tiers of their lenses here, and so I can understand them fleshing out that catalog, and this is certainly a very welcome addition to that catalog. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, you can find linkage to my full text review, also linkage to that image gallery. Be sure to check out photos there, and beyond that you can also find linkage to follow me on social media, to become a patron, to sign up for my newsletter, and of course if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.